My daughter said I was too embarrassing to meet her friends, but I showed up with the invitation to my $4.5 million mansion. The words stuck in my chest like broken glass, cutting me with every breath. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if, for a second, you feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. You'll be helping me continue to get this off my chest. It was a gray Tuesday in Chicago, one of those days where the clouds seem to carry the weight of the world. I was in the kitchen of my small apartment in Pilsen, a place that had been my refuge for 22 years. The peach-colored walls had faded over time, and the Formica table where I had breakfast every morning was covered in cup rings that told the story of thousands of lonely coffees. My name is Eleanor Vance, I'm 62 years old, and that afternoon I was ironing my navy blue dress, the only one I had for special occasions, when my phone rang. It was Jessica, my only daughter, my reason for living, my greatest pride. "Mom," she said, with that tone she'd been using with me lately, as if she were speaking to an inconvenience. "About that dinner tomorrow, it's better if you don't come, okay?" I felt as if the air had become too thick to breathe. The iron slipped from my hand and hung by its cord, swinging like a pendulum marking the rhythm of my broken heart. "What do you mean, don't come, honey? I've been getting ready for a week. I even bought new shoes at Marshall's. It's just that my work friends will be there, important people, and sometimes you say things that are cringy." Each word was a slap. I sat down on the kitchen stool, the same one where I'd sat so many nights sewing her school uniform patches when she was little, the same one where I'd counted out quarters for her school supplies, for her books, for her whims. "What kinds of things, Jessica?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, Mom, don't play the victim. You talk too loud. You don't get it when we talk about Netflix or tech stuff. And the way you dress." She paused, and it felt like an eternity. "I don't want them to think I come from a family that's so basic." My world came crashing down. Basic. The word ricocheted in my head like a ball in a dead-end alley. I, who had worked 14-hour days cleaning offices to pay for her private university. I, who catered events on weekends to buy her brand-name clothes. I, who never bought anything for myself, who wore the same winter coat for 8 years, who took the bus instead of an Uber to save every dollar I could invest in her future. Besides, Mom, those clothes you wear, those shoes that look like they're from another era, that haircut you give yourself. I don't want them to think you're here to ask for money or something. I bit my lip until I tasted the metallic tang of blood. Through my kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Gable's building, my lifelong neighbor, making dinner for her grandkids. She greeted me every morning with a sincere smile, asked about Jessica with genuine affection. Why couldn't my own daughter look at me with the same warmth? "It's all right, sweetheart," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I won't go. Thanks for understanding, Mom. It's just this once, okay? Next time will be different." But I knew there wouldn't be a next time. At least, not as the proud mother I had dreamed of being. I hung up and just sat there, in that kitchen that smelled of cheap detergent and the paper flowers I had made to decorate the refrigerator. The silence became so thick I could hear my own heartbeat, each beat slower and heavier than the last. I went to the bathroom mirror and saw myself for the first time in a long time. I really saw myself. My gray hair, which I trimmed myself every 2 months in front of this very mirror. My wrinkled hands, marked by decades of industrial-strength cleaners and bleach. My blue dress, which had been nice 10 years ago, now looked frayed at the seams, faded in the creases. Was I really that embarrassing? I went back to the kitchen and put the iron away. I hung the blue dress in the closet, in the very back, where I wouldn't have to see it. I made myself a chamomile tea with the honey I always bought at the local market, the kind that tasted like sundaes from my childhood in a small town in Michigan, when my mother would take me to buy fudge after church. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one I'd bought at a garage sale 15 years ago, and pulled out the photo album I kept in the table drawer. They were all there: Jessica on her first day of school, her uniform perfectly pressed, and her braids I had so carefully done. Jessica at her middle school graduation, smiling next to me, back when she still hugged me with pride. Jessica at her sweet 16 party, The one that cost me 3 months of overtime, but which I organized as if she were a princess, because to me, she was. When had I stopped being enough for her? I remembered the time I worked nights at a bakery and days caring for Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman in the neighborhood. I'd get home at 5 in the morning, sleep for 3 hours, and get up to make Jessica's breakfast and take her to school. My feet were always swollen, my back always ached, but when she smiled at me and said, "Thanks, Mommy," all the exhaustion vanished. Now that same girl saw me as a nuisance. The night fell over Chicago like a heavy blanket. The street noises died down, the street vendors packing up their carts, children being called in for dinner, the traffic becoming less dense. And I just sat there, my cold tea in my hands, looking at the photographs of a life I had built with so much love, a life that now felt like a lie. I went to bed without dinner. I wasn't hungry. I had something much worse. The certainty that I had failed as a mother, and the suspicion that maybe I had always been, in fact, too basic for the world my daughter had chosen to inhabit. The next few days crawled by like wounded snails. I woke up each morning hoping it had all been a bad dream, but the silent phone on the kitchen table reminded me that my own daughter had chosen to celebrate her promotion without me. Jessica had landed a manager position at a digital marketing firm. For months, she had told me about the interviews, the nerves, the high hopes. I had prayed every night for her to get this opportunity. I had promised I would do anything. And when they finally called to tell her she'd been selected, I was the first person she called, crying with joy. "Mom, I got it! I got the job!" She had screamed into the phone like a little girl. I had jumped up and down in my kitchen, shouted with excitement, and called all my friends in the building to tell them my daughter was now an executive, Mrs. Gable came down with a bottle of brandy she saved for special occasions, and we toasted in the building's courtyard while I told anyone who would listen that my Jessica was the first professional in our family. But now, in her moment of triumph, I was too embarrassing to be present. I stayed home that night, making lasagna just like I did every Friday. It was a tradition we had kept since Jessica was a teenager. She would come home from school, I'd have dinner ready, and we'd eat while she told me about her classes, her friends, her dreams. It was our sacred time of the week. But that Friday, for the first time in years, I ate alone. I set 2 plates at the table out of habit, poured 2 glasses of iced tea, and when I realized what I'd done, my voice broke. I put everything away in the fridge, knowing no one else was coming to help me finish it. On Saturday, I decided to deep clean my apartment, something I did when I needed to distract my mind. I took everything out of the drawers, moved the furniture, scrubbed every corner. And that's when I found the shoebox I kept under my bed, full of memories I had treasured for 22 years. All her tuition receipts were there, from the private kindergarten to the university. Every month, religiously, I had saved the payment confirmation as if it were a certificate of good motherhood. It had taken so many sacrifices to keep her in schools where her classmates had parents who were doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs. I would show up to the parent-teacher conferences in my best dress, which always looked modest next to the designer suits of the other moms. I vividly remembered the meeting where they discussed the class trip to Europe. All the mothers spoke casually about the $5,000 it would cost, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I stayed silent, mentally calculating how many extra shifts I'd need at the bakery, how many houses I'd have to clean on weekends, what I could sell or pawn. "My mom will give me the money," Jessica had said that night with complete confidence. And I nodded, because I had never learned to say no to her. I worked 18-hour days for 4 months to get that $5,000. I stopped buying meat, eating only beans and rice. I walked for 2 hours to save the bus fare. I skipped meals so the money would stretch further. By the time I finally had the full amount, I had lost a few teeth due to poor nutrition. I had deep, dark circles under my eyes, and I had lost so much weight that my clothes hung off me. But seeing Jessica excited with her new passport and her borrowed suitcase had been worth every sacrifice. In the box, I also found the letters she wrote me from college. "Dear Mommy, thank you for everything you do for me. I know you work so hard to keep me here. I promise that one day I'm going to give you a better life. I love you so much." She had signed them with little hearts and hand-drawn flowers. Where had that grateful girl gone? On Sunday, like every week, I went to the local market to do my shopping. Mr. Henderson, who had run the butcher counter at the same spot for 20 years, greeted me as always. "How's the new manager, Eleanor? Did she get that job she was going for?" "Yes, Mr. Henderson. She's a manager now at a big company," I replied with automatic pride, though the words tasted bitter. "Wow. I bet she's going to buy you a house now, right? Those educated girls always take good care of their moms." I smiled and nodded. But inside, something crumbled a little more. Mr. Henderson's expectations were right, but my reality was very different. That afternoon, as I peeled potatoes for a stew that would last me all week, I reflected on the last few years of our relationship. Jessica had started to change ever since she got her first professional job. At first, it was subtle comments about how I talked, how I dressed, my taste in music and TV. "Mom, you can't keep watching those soap operas. They're so basic," she had said one day, taking the remote from me to switch to a documentary channel in a foreign language. Then she started correcting how I spoke in front of others. "You say, 'It's real good,' not 'It's real tasty,' Mom. It sounds more educated." Or don't say hey, say excuse me, it's classier. Little by little, I had begun to feel like a stranger in my own life, as if everything I had been for 60 years was wrong, insufficient, a source of shame. I remembered the day she had suggested I change my hairstyle. "Mom, that cut makes you look so much older. Why don't you go to a real salon instead of cutting it yourself?" But when I told her I didn't have money for those luxuries, her reply broke my heart. "Oh, Mom, always the same excuse. If you wanted to, you'd find a way." That night, lying in my single bed on the mattress that sagged on the side where I slept, I looked up at the ceiling and asked myself the question I had been avoiding for months. Was I really the problem? Was it true that my motherly love had become too heavy a burden for a modern, successful daughter? I got up and stood in front of the bathroom mirror again. This time, I didn't just see an old woman with gray hair and wrinkles. I saw someone who had given everything without asking for anything in return, who had built someone else's success with her own chapped hands, who had turned every dollar earned into an opportunity for someone else. But apparently, that wasn't enough to be worthy of a celebration dinner. Monday came like a cold slap in the face. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, as I had for the last 15 years, to go clean the offices in the corporate tower in the Loop. My knees cracked as I got out of bed, reminding me that I wasn't 20 anymore, that my body had paid the price for so much physical labor. I dressed in my cleaning uniform. Navy blue pants, a white polo shirt, comfortable shoes that had lost their shape long ago. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection showed me the image of what Jessica called basic. Maybe she was right. The L train was full of early morning workers like me. People who got up before sunrise so that others could arrive at clean, orderly offices. I recognized a few familiar faces. Gloria, who cleaned a hospital. Ray, who worked as a night watchman at a factory. Maria, a woman my age who was a nanny for a family in Lincoln Park. None of us were embarrassing. We were the invisible backbone of the city. I arrived at the 30-story building where I had worked for a decade. The security guard, a young man named Mike, greeted me as always. "Morning, Eleanor. How are you today?" "Doing fine, Mike. Thanks for asking," I replied, trying to make my voice sound normal. I went up to the 15th floor, where the consulting firm I cleaned was located. As I vacuumed between the sleek cubicles, I couldn't help but look at the family photos employees kept on their desks. Proud parents with graduating children, smiling families on expensive vacations, mothers hugging their professional daughters at celebration dinners. Why didn't I deserve to be in a picture like that? On the desk of Ms. Patricia, a female executive in her 40s, there was a new photo. She was toasting with an older woman at what looked like an elegant restaurant. On the back, someone had written, "Celebrating my promotion with the most important woman in my life. I love you, Mom." My eyes welled up. I had to stop and take a deep breath. At 10 in the morning, my phone rang. For a moment, my heart leaped, thinking it might be Jessica calling to apologize, to tell me it was all a misunderstanding, that of course I was welcome in her world. But it wasn't her. "Am I speaking with Mrs. Eleanor Vance?" asked a male voice with an Italian accent. "Yes, this is she. Who's calling?" My name is Marco Rossi. I am an estate attorney in Siena, Italy. I am calling regarding a matter related to a Mrs. Angela Russo. I understand she was your aunt. The name hit me like a lightning bolt. Aunt Angela, my mother's older sister, who had moved to Italy when I was just 12. We had exchanged sporadic letters during my teenage years, but over time, we lost touch. The last I had heard of her was more than 20 years ago. Yes, she was my aunt. Has something happened? I am sorry to inform you that Mrs. Russo passed away 3 weeks ago. She died peacefully, in her home, at the age of 87. I sank into an office chair, my legs feeling weak. Aunt Angela was gone, and I hadn't even known. Another loss, another goodbye that came too late. I'm so sorry, I murmured. I didn't know she was sick. She was not ill, Mrs. Vance. She died of natural causes in her sleep, but I am calling because you are mentioned in her will. My heart stopped completely. Me? According to the documents I have here, you visited her for 3 consecutive summers when you were young. Is that correct? The memories came flooding back. I was 17, 18, and 19 when my mother sent me to Italy to look after Aunt Angela during the summer months. She lived in a huge house on the outskirts of Siena, an old stone villa surrounded by gardens. She had been widowed young and had no children, so I became her companion during those magical summers. I remembered mornings making breakfast in her high-ceilinged kitchen, afternoons reading in her library filled with old books, nights listening to her stories about Italy, about life, about the loves she had lost. She taught me how to cook Tuscan dishes, took me to see medieval cathedrals, and gave me my first elegant dress. Yes, I took care of her for 3 summers, I confirmed, my voice breaking with emotion. Well, Mrs. Vance, Mrs. Russo named you as her sole universal heir. She has left you her house and all of her possessions. The world stood still. The lawyer's words bounced around in my head, unable to find a place to land. Heir? Universal? No, I don't understand. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, madam. I have the will right here. It says, and I quote, "To my niece, Eleanor Vance, who cared for me with selfless love during the most beautiful summers of my old age, I leave my entire estate." She understood that true affection is not measured in money, but in time and dedication. May this inheritance give back to her all the love she gave me. Tears began to fall uncontrollably. Aunt Angela had remembered those summers. She had remembered the mornings I helped her bathe, the afternoons I read the newspaper to her because her eyesight was failing, the nights I stayed by her bed until she fell asleep because she was afraid of the dark. How much is the house worth? I asked, my voice a thread. The property was recently appraised at $4.5 million, Mrs. Vance, and there are also bank savings of approximately $325,000 more. The phone fell from my hands. $4.5 million. A fortune that had come to me, to the basic and embarrassing woman who didn't deserve a seat at her own daughter's celebration dinner. I sat there in that empty office, surrounded by other people's desks and computers that didn't belong to me, processing the most shocking news of my life. For 62 years I had been poor, had worked until my back broke, had sacrificed everything for a daughter who now rejected me, and the universe had been saving this surprise for me. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. "Mr. Rossi, are you still there?" "Yes, madam. Are you all right?" "What? What do I need to do?" "First, we must confirm your identity with official documents. Then, you will need to travel to Italy to sign the transfer papers. Everything is in order. We just need to complete the legal formalities." I hung up the phone and sat motionless for I don't know how long. The offices began to fill with employees arriving for their day, but I remained seated, invisible as always, processing that my life had just changed forever. For the first time in decades, I truly smiled. The basic woman had just become a millionaire. And for some reason, the first thing I thought of wasn't all the things I could buy for myself, but the look on Jessica's face when she found out who her embarrassing mother really was. I didn't tell anyone about the lawyer's call. For 3 days, I walked around my apartment as if I were a stranger visiting someone else's life. I looked in the mirror and saw the same woman as always. But inside, something had shifted. It was as if I had been carrying an invisible backpack full of rocks for decades, and suddenly someone had told me I could take it off. On Thursday, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to work. I told my supervisor, Mrs. Davis, that I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was sick of a life that no longer fit me, sick of feeling small, sick of apologizing for my existence. Instead of cleaning other people's offices, I went to Millennium Park in downtown Chicago. It had been over 10 years since I had walked through the city without a rush, without an agenda, without the urgency of getting to a job. I sat on a bench and watched people pass by. Tourists taking pictures, families out for a stroll, street performers entertaining crowds. No one looked at me with pity. No one thought I was embarrassing. To the world, I was just another woman, deserving of respect like anyone else. Why couldn't my own daughter see me that way? That afternoon, for the first time in my life, I walked into a fancy cafe in the Gold Coast. The kind of place Jessica took her friends, with velvet chairs and waiters who spoke in hushed tones. I ordered a coffee that cost as much as I spent on food for 2 days, but I paid for it without guilt. I sat by the window and watched the well-dressed women come and go, talking on expensive phones about business meetings and social dinners. They weren't different from me. They had just had different opportunities. On Friday night, Jessica called. "Hey, Mom, how are you?" Her voice was casual, as if our last conversation hadn't been a knife to the heart. "I'm fine, honey. And you? How was your dinner?" "Oh, it was great. My bosses were really impressed with me. I think they're going to give me more responsibility soon. And my coworkers are amazing. You have to meet them someday." The irony burned my throat. Someday, when I was presentable enough for her world. "I'm very happy for you, sweetie." "Hey, Mom, I'm calling because I need a favor." Of course. She always needed a favor when she called lately. "What do you need?" "So, I got invited to a work retreat in Miami next weekend. It's super important for my career. All the directors will be there. But I need to buy new clothes because there are going to be elegant dinners at expensive restaurants, and you know my wardrobe isn't up to par." She waited for my response. I knew what was coming next. "Could you lend me $500? I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I get my quarterly bonus." $500. A significant chunk of my monthly salary. For clothes she would wear for one weekend to impress people who probably wouldn't remember her name in 6 months. "Jessica, things are really tight this month. I had some medical expenses." I lied, because I had never learned to just say no. "Ugh, Mom, it's always the same thing with you. You never have money for anything important? Don't you understand that this opportunity could change my career?" Her tone shifted to that of a spoiled teenager, as if my financial limitations were a personal strategy to ruin her dreams. "Look, Mom, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I've never asked you for anything outrageous. I just need you to support me this one time. After this, I won't need help anymore." It was the same promise she had been making for 5 years. After this, I won't need help. But after this never came. "You really can't get $500? Not even by borrowing it or something?" "Honey, I make $1,800 a month. $500 is almost a third of what I have to live on. But you have savings, right? Everyone has savings for emergencies." "Savings?" My only savings were the coins I kept in a jar to buy bread when my paycheck ran out before the end of the month. "I don't have savings, Jessica." An uncomfortable silence followed. "Ugh, Mom, you're so frustrating. I can't be worrying about your financial situation when I'm trying to get ahead. I'm 26 now. I need to focus on my future, not on taking care of you." Every word was a rusty nail driving into my chest. Taking care of me? When had she ever taken care of me? When had she worried if I had enough to eat, warm clothes for the winter, money for a doctor when I got sick? "All right, honey, I understand. So you'll lend me the money? I'll see what I can do." "Thanks, Mom. I knew I could count on you. I'll text you my bank info." She hung up without asking how I was, without asking if I had eaten, without telling me she loved me. I stood there with the phone in my hand, staring at the blank screen. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I was not going to send her the money. For the first time in 26 years, I was going to say no to my daughter. The next day, Jessica sent 3 texts. First, her bank account number. Then a picture of the dresses she wanted to buy. Finally, a message that read, "Mom, it's 3 p.m. and I don't see the transfer. Is everything okay?" I didn't answer. At 6, she called. "Mom, what's going on? You're not answering my texts." "Hello, honey. Did you send the money? I need to go shopping tonight because the stores close early tomorrow." I took a deep breath. It felt like I was about to jump off a cliff. "I'm not sending you the money, Jessica." Silence. "What do you mean you're not sending it? We agreed you were going to help me. You agreed to that. I said I would see what I could do. And I can't do anything." "But Mom, it's my job. It's my future." "It's your job, honey. Your future, not mine. What is wrong with you? Why are you being so selfish?" Selfish. After 26 years of giving her everything I had and much of what I didn't, I was selfish for not being able to give her $500 more. "Jessica, I'm 62 years old. I've been working since I was 14. I've never had a vacation, never bought myself new clothes, never been to a fancy restaurant. I have given everything for you, and apparently that makes me someone embarrassing for your social life." "Oh my God, Mom. Here we go with the victim act. I never said you were embarrassing. You said I was too basic to meet your friends. You said you didn't want them to think you came from a family like ours. That was different. It was a special occasion. And this is a special occasion too, honey. It's the special occasion where you learn to solve your own problems without using your mother as an ATM." I had never spoken like this. I didn't even know I had these words inside me. "You know what, Mom? You're right about one thing. I am ashamed of where I come from. I'm ashamed that my mom would rather stay poor than try for something better. I'm ashamed that you always have an excuse for everything." And she hung up. I sat in my kitchen, trembling. Not from fear, but from an emotion I had never felt before. Freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen myself over someone else's whim, and it felt terrifying and beautiful at the same time. For 3 days, my phone was silent. Not a text, not a call, not even an insult from Jessica. It was as if I had ceased to exist for her the moment I stopped being useful. And strangely, instead of feeling sad, I felt relieved. For the first time in years, my mornings didn't start with the anxiety of wondering if my daughter would need something from me. I didn't obsessively check my phone for her messages. I didn't mentally calculate how much money I had left for her constant emergencies. On Tuesday, I decided to do something I had been putting off since the lawyer's call: research my inheritance. I went to a public library near the market and looked up information on Siena, on house prices in Italy, on the value of the euro. When I saw the figures converted to US dollars, I had to sit down and take a deep breath. Over $6 million. I, Eleanor Vance, the basic woman who cleaned offices for $1,800 a month, had inherited over $6 million. That evening, I called the lawyer, Marco Rossi, to confirm it was all real. "Mrs. Vance, it is a pleasure to hear from you. Have you decided when you might be able to travel to Italy? I want to go as soon as possible," I told him with a firmness that surprised me. "Excellent. I can recommend some hotels near my office." "No," I interrupted him. "I want to stay at my aunt's house." At my house. My house. The words sounded strange but wonderful in my mouth. The next day, I did something I never thought I would do. I quit my cleaning job. My supervisor, Mrs. Davis, looked at me in shock when I handed her my washed and ironed uniform for the last time. "Are you sure, Eleanor? You're one of our best employees? Did you find something better?" "Yes, Mrs. Davis. I found something much better." I didn't tell her what that something better was. I just smiled and said goodbye to my coworkers, women like me who rose before the sun to keep other people's worlds clean. That afternoon, I went to a travel agency downtown and bought my first ever plane ticket. Chicago to Rome, economy class. But it was mine. I paid for it with the emergency savings I had. The few $1,000s I had scraped together, coin by coin, over the years. The travel agent, a young woman with perfect nails and flawless makeup, treated me with the same professional courtesy she would have given any other client. She didn't know I had been cleaning toilets until the day before. To her, I was simply a woman who could afford a trip to Europe. "Is this your first time in Italy?" she asked as she printed my documents. No, I replied with pride. I'm going home. On Friday, 2 days before my flight, I finally received a text from Jessica. Mom, I know you're mad at me, but we need to talk. Come to my apartment tomorrow at 5 p.m. I have something important to tell you. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons, as always. But this time, I had changed. On Saturday, I arrived punctually at her apartment in Lincoln Park, a place she had paid for with her job but furnished with my money. I rang the bell and waited. When she opened the door, I noticed something different in her expression. She looked nervous. Hi, Mom. Come in. Her apartment looked impeccable, as always. Modern furniture, minimalist decor, everything coordinated in neutral colors. Nothing that hinted at our old life, nothing to suggest where she really came from. Sit down, she said, pointing to the gray sofa that I had helped her pay for when she moved in. I sat, but this time not with the shrunken posture of a mother coming to apologize. I sat up straight, my hands on my lap, waiting. Look, Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened last week. I waited in silence. I think we both said things we shouldn't have. I understand that your financial situation is complicated, and I shouldn't have pressured you for the retreat money. Her voice sounded rehearsed, as if she had practiced this speech in front of a mirror. But I also think you don't understand the pressure I'm under at my job. It's not easy being young in such a competitive environment. I need to protect my professional image. I still didn't respond. She grew increasingly uncomfortable with my silence. What I'm trying to say is, I found a solution for both of us. She stood up and brought a folder from her desk. I've been doing some research, and there are government programs for senior citizens, pensions, healthcare assistance, even subsidized apartments for people your age. She opened the folder and showed me printed papers, brochures with photos of retirement homes and adult daycare centers. Look, Mom, this program would give you a monthly stipend and a place to live. It wouldn't be an expense for you, and I could visit you on weekends without the pressure of maintaining 2 households. My heart stopped. She was proposing I check myself into a retirement home to get rid of me in a legal and socially acceptable way. It's perfect, don't you think? You would have financial security and medical care, and I could focus on my career without worrying about you. She looked up, waiting for my response, with the same expression she used as a child when she was asking for candy money. Have you already filled out the paperwork? I asked in a calm voice. Well, I need your signature on a few things, but yes, I've looked into the whole process. You could be settled in within 2 weeks. I remained silent for a few more seconds, processing the magnitude of what she was proposing. My own daughter, the child for whom I had sacrificed my youth, my health, my future, was asking me to go die alone in a nursing home so she could live without the shame of having a poor mother. Jessica, I said finally, do you know what tomorrow is? Sunday? It's Sunday, October 15th. Exactly 26 years ago, you were born. On October 15th, 1997. She looked confused by the change of topic. That day, when I held you in my arms for the first time, I promised you that you would never want for anything. And I kept that promise, didn't I? She nodded, uncomfortably. You never lacked food, clothes, education, opportunities. I never asked you to work to help with the bills. I never made you feel like you were a burden. I stood up. But today, on the anniversary of your birth, my own daughter is asking me to go die in a home so she can live without the nuisance of having a basic and embarrassing mother. Mom, it's not like that. It's exactly like that, Jessica. And you know what? You're right about one thing. It's time for me to think about my future without worrying about you. I walked toward the door. Where are you going? I'm going to Italy, honey. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow and I don't know when I'll be back. Italy? What are you talking about? You don't have money to travel. I stopped at the door and looked at her one last time with the eyes of a protective mother. Turns out I do have money, Jessica. A lot of money. And you know what the saddest part of all this is? For years I dreamed of the day I could give you a better life. But now I realize the problem was never the money. The problem is that I raised a daughter who is ashamed of the woman who loved her unconditionally. I walked out of the apartment and closed the door behind me. In the elevator, for the first time in months, I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I saw a 62-year-old woman who had decided to save herself, and I liked what I saw. The plane took off from Chicago on a gray October Monday, carrying me far away from everything I had known for 62 years. As I watched the lights of my city disappear beneath the clouds, I didn't feel sadness. I felt like I was being born for a second time. During the 13-hour flight, I couldn't sleep, not from nerves, but from excitement. It was the first time in my life I was traveling alone, making a decision that was entirely my own, heading towards something that belonged to me without having to borrow it or pay for it with someone else's sacrifices. I landed in Rome at 2 p.m, Italian time. The Fiumicino airport seemed enormous and modern, filled with people from every country speaking languages I didn't understand. But I didn't feel lost. For the first time in years, I knew exactly where I was going. I took the train to Siena. During the journey, I saw landscapes I vaguely remembered from my summers as a youth. Green fields, stone villages, rolling hills that stretched to the horizon. Italy smelled different from Illinois. It smelled of ancient history, of frequent rain, of damp earth. Marco Rossi, the lawyer, was waiting for me at the station with a warm smile and a sign with my name on it. He was a man in his 50s. Elegantly dressed but without pretense. "Mrs. Vance, it is an honor to finally meet you. Your aunt spoke of you often. She talked about me?" "Of course. Every time she came to my office to update her will, she mentioned the sweet Mexican niece who had cared for her with such love. She said you were the only person who treated her like family and not an obligation." As we drove to the house, Marco told me more about Aunt Angela. She was a very wise woman, you know? She never had children of her own, but she said you gave her the happiest summers of her life. "That girl saw me as a person, not as a bothersome old woman," she would always repeat. The words went straight to my heart. Aunt Angela had felt with me the same thing I had hoped to feel with Jessica. Unconditional love, genuine respect, companionship without strings attached. When we arrived in front of the house, my breath caught in my throat. It was exactly as I remembered, but more beautiful. A 2-story stone villa with large windows framed in green-painted wood, surrounded by gardens that someone had meticulously maintained. It had a wrought iron gate that opened to an inner courtyard full of flowers whose names I didn't know, but that filled the air with perfume. "Signora Maria, the neighbor, has been looking after the house since Signora Angela passed," Marco explained as he opened the main door with an antique key. "She has the spare keys and knows all the details of the property." I stepped into my house for the first time as its owner. The interior was even more impressive than I remembered. High ceilings with wooden beams, stone floors that had been polished for centuries, a huge fireplace in the main living room. The furniture was antique but elegant. Leather sofas that had softened with time, solid oak tables, shelves filled with books in Italian and English. "Your aunt left everything exactly as it was," Marco said. "Even the clothes are still in the closets. She said you would know what to do with everything." I climbed the stone staircase that I remembered cleaning so many times during my youthful summers. The second floor had 4 bedrooms, all with windows overlooking the garden or the distant hills. The master bedroom, where Aunt Angela had slept, had a massive 4-poster bed made of carved wood and a desk where she used to write letters. On the desk was an envelope with my name written in her shaky handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means you have finally come home. This house was always yours, from the very first summer you spent here. I remember how you cared for me without anyone asking, how you made me laugh with your stories of America, how you never treated me like a burden. I hope that in this house, you find the peace you deserve. The money is in an account at the Banca Toscana. The documents are in the safe behind the portrait in the living room. But the most important thing is that you know this. You are a valuable woman, Eleanor. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. With all my love, your Aunt Angela. P.S. In my bedroom closet, there are some dresses I had made especially for you. A woman like you deserves beautiful clothes." I cried for the first time since I had arrived in Italy, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of being seen. I opened the closet and found 6 dresses hanging with tags that read, For Eleanor with love. They were elegant but not ostentatious, made from beautiful fabrics in colors that flattered my complexion. One was navy blue, like the dress I had ironed for Jessica's dinner, but this one was silk, with a perfect cut, the kind that would have cost more than I earned in 6 months. I tried on the blue dress and looked at myself in the closet's full-length mirror. For the first time in my life, I looked elegant. The next day, Marco took me to the bank to formalize the account transfer. The branch manager, an older man named Mr. Sterling, treated me with a respect I hadn't experienced in decades. "Mrs. Vance, your aunt was one of our most respected clients. It is an honor to assist you with the transition of her estate." When I saw the account statement, I almost fainted. Aunt Angela had not only saved her whole life, but she had invested wisely. The $325,000 Marco had mentioned had grown to over $500,000. "What kind of investments would you recommend for someone like me?" I asked, surprising myself with my own boldness in speaking about money as if I understood it. "That depends on your plans, madam. Do you plan to stay in Italy or return to the United States?" For the first time, I allowed myself to seriously consider the question. What was waiting for me in Chicago? An empty apartment, a job I had already left, a daughter who saw me as an embarrassment and wanted to put me in a home. "I think I'm going to stay in Italy," I said, and the words sounded right in my mouth. That afternoon, I called Mrs. Gable, my lifelong neighbor back in Chicago. "Eleanor, how are you, dear? Jessica came by asking for you. Says you left without a word. What did you tell her?" I told her I didn't know anything, but she looked very worried. "Well, more like confused, as if she couldn't understand why you would have left." I told Mrs. Gable about my inheritance, the house, my decision to stay. She listened in silence, and when I finished, she sighed deeply. "Oh, Eleanor, it's about time the universe gave you back some of what you've put out into the world. And it's about time you decided to think about yourself. Do you think I'm a bad mother for leaving? Honey, you're a bad mother for taking so long to leave. That girl needs to learn to appreciate what she had." I hung up the phone, feeling more secure in my decision. That night, I had dinner alone in my house for the first time. I prepared a simple meal with ingredients from the local market: Tuscan bread, aged cheese, prosciutto, and a local red wine. I ate in the garden, under the stars, listening to the silence of the countryside, broken only by the distant sound of church bells from the village. I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. For the first time in my adult life, no one needed anything from me. No one depended on my money, my time, my energy. I didn't have to wake up early for work. I didn't have to worry about bills. I didn't have to calculate how much money was left for someone else's emergencies. I was completely, utterly free to be myself, and I discovered I really liked the person I was when no one else needed her. 3 weeks after my arrival in Italy, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was a number from Chicago I didn't recognize, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Mom? Mom? Is that you?" It was Jessica, but her voice sounded different, hoarse, as if she had been crying for hours. "Yes, it's me. Thank God. I've been looking everywhere for you. Mrs. Gable wouldn't tell me where you were. I went to your job and they said you quit. Where are you? What's going on?" I got out of my new bed, in my new house, and looked out the window. The garden was covered in morning dew, and birds were singing in the trees that were now mine. Everything was perfect and peaceful. "I'm in Italy, honey." "Italy? What are you talking about? You don't know anyone in Italy. How did you get there?" "With what money?" "With my money." "Your money? Mom, you don't have money. Did you get into some kind of trouble? Did you owe someone money? Is that why you left the country?" Her first reaction was not concern for my well-being. It was to assume I had done something wrong, something irresponsible, something that would embarrass her. "I'm not in any trouble, Jessica. I inherited a house and money from my Aunt Angela." A long silence. "What Aunt Angela? You don't have any rich family." "My mother's sister, the one who lived near Siena. I took care of her for 3 summers when I was young." "And she left you money? How much money?" "Of course." Her second question wasn't about my emotional state or if I was lonely in a foreign country. It was about how much money I had inherited. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. "Oh my God, Mom, that's amazing. When are you coming back?" We can look for a bigger house, maybe in Lincoln Park or the Gold Coast. We can finally live well. She had automatically included my inheritance in her future plans. I'm not coming back, Jessica. What do you mean you're not coming back? You can't just stay in Italy forever. You don't know anyone. You'll be all alone. You're too old to be by yourself in a foreign country. I have neighbors, honey, and I'm 62, not 90. I'm not a decrepit old woman. But Mom, I need you here. We're family. Family. Now we were family. When she wanted to put me in a home so she could focus on her career, I was a burden. When she found out I had money, we were family. Do you need me, or do you need my money? Mom, how can you say that? Of course I need you. You're my mom. I'm the same mom you wanted to put in a nursing home a month ago because you were embarrassed to introduce me to your friends. That was different, Mom. I was stressed from work. I said things I shouldn't have. But I've done a lot of thinking, and I realize I made mistakes. Mistakes. Not cruelty, not emotional abuse, not disrespect. Mistakes. Did you realize that when you went on vacation to Miami without my money? How do you know I went to Miami? Mrs. Gable saw the pictures you posted on Facebook. You looked very happy in those expensive restaurants, with those new clothes you bought with money you got from somewhere else. An awkward silence. Look, Mom, I know I messed up, but things are going to be different now. With the money you inherited, we can start over. I can quit my job if you want. We can travel together. We can do all the things we always wanted to do. All the things we always wanted to do. As if she had ever dreamed of spending time with me. As if my wishes had ever factored into her plans. And what is it that we always wanted to do together, Jessica? Well, I don't know. We can go shopping, redecorate the house, travel. Did you ever once ask me what I wanted to do? Of course I did. No, honey, you never did. In 26 years, you never asked me what my dreams were, what made me happy, what I wanted for my future. You just assumed my only function was to give you what you wanted. Mom, that's not true. It's completely true. Do you know what my dream was? My dream was to have a daughter who was proud of me. A daughter who would introduce me to her friends not as an embarrassment to be hidden, but as the woman who sacrificed everything to give her the best life possible. I heard her start to cry. Mom, please come back. I promise it will be different. We'll be a real family. We are a real family, Jessica. A family where one person gives everything and the other takes it as if it's their right. But that family is over. You can't be serious. You can't just abandon me like this. Abandon her. As if she hadn't abandoned me first, emotionally and socially. Honey, you abandoned me long before I left the country. You abandoned me when you decided I was too embarrassing for your life. You abandoned me when you turned me into your personal ATM. You abandoned me when you proposed putting me in a nursing home so you wouldn't have to deal with me. I never said that. You said exactly that. You brought brochures, you had researched the programs, you wanted me to sign papers. All so you could live your life without the nuisance of a poor, basic mother. Okay, I said those horrible things. But I was confused. I was pressured by work, by my friends. I wasn't thinking clearly. And you're thinking clearly now? Yes, Mom. Now I understand that you're the most important person in my life. No, honey. Now you understand that I'm the richest person in your life. That's very different. Her crying intensified. Please, Mom, come back. I need you. What exactly do you need me for? To be together. To be a family. So I can pay your bills while you're ashamed of me? No. That won't happen again. I promise. Jessica, you've made me a lot of promises in your life. That you'd take care of me when I was old. That you'd give me a better life. That someday you'd take me on a trip. That when you got a good job, you'd buy me a house. How many of those promises did you keep? It's just, I didn't have money before. I didn't have money either, honey. And yet I kept every single promise I ever made to you. Mom, please. I'm going to tell you something. And I want you to listen carefully. I will love you for the rest of my life. You are my daughter, and that will never change. But I am not coming back to be the convenient mother who appears when you need her and disappears when you don't, when I'm in your way. So what do you want me to do? I want you to learn to live without using me. I want you to build a life that doesn't depend on my money or my labor. I want it so that when you call me, it's because you genuinely want to know how I am, not because you need something from me. And if I do that, will you come back? If you do that, then maybe you can come visit me in Italy, as a guest in my house with mutual respect, like two adults who choose to be together. Your house? Is it big? And there it was again. Her fascination with property, with money, with status symbols. Jessica, you just proved exactly why I can't come back yet. What? What did I say? Instead of asking if I'm lonely, if I'm healthy, if I'm happy, you ask me if my house is big. You just care about the money, like always. Okay, you're right. Are you happy, Mom? Are you okay? But the question sounded mechanical, forced, like it was a box she had to check to get to the topic she really cared about. I'm happier than I have been in years, honey. For the first time in my life, nobody needs me for anything other than being myself. That sounds so sad. On the contrary, it sounds liberating. And I hung up the phone. I sat there in my kitchen, sipping Italian coffee and looking out the window at the green fields stretching toward the hills. For the first time, I had a conversation with my daughter where I had set the rules. And it felt wonderful. 6 months later, I was in my garden pruning the roses I had planted in the spring when my doorbell rang. It was an April Saturday, and the Tuscan sun warmed my back gently as I worked the soil with my own hands for the sheer pleasure of it. From the kitchen window, I could see a young woman standing in front of the wrought iron gate. She had a small suitcase and looked nervous. When she turned toward the window, I recognized her face immediately. It was Jessica. She hadn't announced her visit. She hadn't asked for permission. She had simply shown up, just as she used to do in Chicago when she needed something from me. But I was no longer the same woman who let herself be caught off guard by her daughter's demands. I walked to the gate without rushing, wiping my hands on the gardening apron I'd bought at the village market. I had grown accustomed to taking my time with everything, to not running to please others. "Hi, Mom," she said when I opened the gate. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying during the 14-hour flight from the States. "Hello, Jessica. How did you get here?" I hired a taxi from the Florence airport. It cost a fortune, but I didn't know how else to get here. Of course, her first concern was still about money. "You didn't tell me you were coming. I wanted to surprise you, and I was afraid you'd tell me not to come." We stood there facing each other, she on the outside of the gate, I on the inside. It was a perfect metaphor for our current relationship. "Can I come in?" she finally asked. I studied her for a moment. She looked different, thinner, less put together than usual. Her clothes were stylish but wrinkled from the journey. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes, and her hands were trembling slightly. "You can come in," I said, opening the gate completely. But as a guest, not as someone coming home. She walked in, dragging her suitcase across the stone courtyard. She stopped in front of the central fountain and looked around in awe. The gardens were at their peak. Blue hydrangeas bloomed abundantly. Climbing roses covered the stone walls, and the aromatic herbs I had planted filled the air with lavender and rosemary. "It's beautiful, Mom. It's like a palace." "It's my home," I corrected her. "Are you hungry? Do you want something to drink?" "Yes, please." The flight was endless. I led her to the kitchen, where I had been preparing a caprese salad for my lunch. I poured 2 glasses of water and sliced some fresh Tuscan bread I had bought that morning at the village bakery. We sat at the oak table that overlooked the back garden. "I can't believe this is all yours," she said, looking at the high, beamed ceilings and the large windows that perfectly framed the green landscape of the hills. "It's mine," I confirmed. "Why did you come, Jessica?" She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I wanted to see you. It's been 6 months since we talked. We've spoken on the phone twice in 6 months, and both times you hung up on me when I didn't say what you wanted to hear." "You're right. I behaved badly. What happened back in Chicago? How's your job?" "I quit." I looked at her, surprised. Jessica had never quit anything without having something better lined up. "Why did you quit?" "I couldn't focus after you left. I realized that maybe you were right about some things." "What things?" "That I only thought about myself. That I had treated you horribly. That I had taken everything you gave me as if it was my right." The words sounded rehearsed. but there was something different in her tone. Less manipulation, more genuine vulnerability. "And what did you do after you quit?" "I went to therapy. For 4 months. The therapist helped me understand a lot of things. I hadn't expected that." Jessica had always said therapy was for weak people with mental problems. What kind of things? That I had built my identity around rejecting where I came from. That I was ashamed of our past because I thought it made me more valuable. That I had turned your unconditional love into something I just took for granted. She paused and looked me directly in the eye for the first time since she arrived. And that I had probably lost the most important person in my life by being a horrible daughter. Her tears were different this time. They weren't the manipulative tears she used to use when she wanted something. They were the tears of someone who had truly looked in the mirror and disliked what they saw. "What else did the therapist tell you?" "That I had to learn to value myself for who I am, not for what I have or how others see me. That I had to stop using people as stepping stones to get where I wanted to go. And that I had to apologize to you without expecting you to forgive me." "Without expecting me to forgive you?" "My therapist says forgiveness is a gift, not an obligation. That I don't have the right to demand it just because I finally realized I was wrong." I stayed silent, processing her words. This version of Jessica was completely new to me. "Is that why you came all the way to Italy? To apologize?" "Partly, but also to really get to know my mom." "What do you mean?" "I realized I'd never asked you about your life, about your dreams, your fears, your hopes. I only knew what was convenient for me to know, that you would always be there when I needed you." She wiped her tears with a linen napkin, one that I had embroidered during my first few months in Italy, when I was learning to fill my time with activities that brought me joy instead of just producing income. "I want to know who Eleanor Vance is when she's not being my mom. I want to know what you like to do in the mornings, what books you read, if you have friends here, if you're truly happy." For the first time in 26 years, my daughter was seeing me as a whole person instead of just a function in her life. "And what if you don't like what you find?" I asked. "Then I'll learn to live with it. But I'd rather know my real mom than keep living with the version of you I created in my head." I told her about my routine in Italy, how I woke up when I felt like it, not to an alarm clock, how I had learned to cook Tuscan dishes from a neighbor named Sophia, who had become my friend, how I read books from the village library and had started a book club with other women my age. I told her about the painting class I took on Tuesdays at the community center, about the hikes I took on the mountain trails, about the afternoons I spent just sitting in my garden listening to the birds, not thinking about anything productive. "You sound so free," she said with a sad smile. "I am. For the first time in my life, I am completely free to be who I want to be." "And does who you want to be include being my mom?" The question went straight to my heart. "I will always be your mom, Jessica. But now I'm a mom who respects herself, a mom who has boundaries, a mom who will not sacrifice her own well-being to make someone else happy, even if that someone else is me, especially if that someone else is you. Because the best lesson I can give you as a mother is to teach you that women deserve respect, self-love, and dignity." She was quiet for a few minutes, looking out the window at the golden fields stretching to the horizon. "Is there a place for me in this new life of yours?" "There's a place for the daughter who is sitting here with me now, asking about my happiness instead of my money. There's a place for the woman who acknowledges her mistakes and wants to truly know her mother. And for the daughter who's still going to mess up sometimes because she's learning to be different, there's a place for her too. But on the condition that when you mess up, you own it. You apologize sincerely, and you try to do better next time. Can I stay for a few days? I want to learn about you, and I want you to teach me how to be a better person." "You can stay for 1 week," I told her. "But you'll sleep in the guest room, you'll help with the chores, and you'll respect my routines and my space. I accept all the conditions." That night, after we had dinner together for the first time in months, we went for a walk through the village. Jessica asked about everything: the names of the streets, the history of the medieval church, the local customs. She really listened when I answered, without interrupting to turn the conversation back to herself. When we got back to the house, she sat with me in the garden while I watered the plants. "Mom," she said softly, "do you forgive me?" I looked down at my hands working the soil, feeling the damp texture between my fingers, breathing in the scent of the flowers I had planted and cared for myself. I forgive you, honey, but more importantly, I forgive myself for letting you treat me that way for so many years. And that night, for the first time in decades, I went to sleep knowing that my daughter saw me not as a source of resources, but as a complete and valuable woman. A woman who had learned that true love begins with loving yourself. Have you ever experienced something like this? Or do you know someone who has gone through a similar situation? If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments. And if you think this message can help someone who needs it, please like and subscribe so it can reach more people who deserve to be reminded of their own worth.